Hello guys, welcome back. This is Jessie. Reviewing products from ROSESELSA is probably pretty controversial at this point. It's not exactly a well-known brand internationally, yet I just keep talking about their stuff. But here's the thing, this brand is actually very famous in where I live. Top of the charts kind of sales, and from what I've heard, their annual revenue is getting close to maybe 600 million RMB. So if anything, you don't need to worry. The more controversial a product is, the stricter I am with my testing. Your trust is literally the foundation of this channel, so I take this seriously. Now, let's talk about the Cambrian. And honestly, I really want to be extra critical with this one. But when it comes to the comfort, the sound quality, the feature, and noise cancelling, it generally performs way above its price. This thing is basically a full-on spec monster. It actually reminds me a lot of the Edifier Air Pro 4. You almost can't believe how much you are getting at this price. So today I want to focus on how good the noise cancelling really is and where the sound stands compared to the popular models like the Edifier W830NB and whether things like call quality and the battery life actually hold up. And yes, I'll be very straightforward about the downsides too. So sorry, ROSESELSA. Starting with the hardware and the features, the Cambrian comes standard with the dual-device connection and up to 100 hours of battery life. A portable folding design similar to the Sony's, and both wired and wireless connectivity. And in wireless mode, it supports the LDAC, and it uses the ROSESELSA signature, the plug drivers, and has a 5 microphone setup. Just looking at the spec sheets, it's pretty clear that the ROSESELSA is pushing high-end over-ear features down into a much lower price bracket. And in terms of the raw configuration, the Cambrian just easily beats the most of the headphones in its category. So as for the design, if you just glanced at the headphones themselves, nothing really screams unique. There is a glossy alloy accent, but that's about it. That said, the overall build quality is noticeably better than the Edifier W830. It doesn't feel plastic at all, and honestly, it feels like they just hired a new designer. The comfort on over-ear headphones mainly comes down to the earpads material, the pad steps, and the headband adjustment range and clamping force. The protein leather earpads on the Cambrian are very soft, with much better rebound and cushioning compared to the JBL or the Edifier pads. Just inside the ear cups, there is not just a dust mesh, but also a thin layer of the memory foam, which is actually worth mentioning. A lot of headphones just only have a mesh layer, and after long sessions, your ear just starts hurting. The headband cushioning is also thought out very well. I have no idea whether I can show it in the camera, and it's slightly elastic, almost a triangular in structure. When you press down, the resistance increases as it gets closer to the headband. That means even after hours of use, your head never fully presses against anything hard. So I've mentioned this before in other reviews that I have a relatively small head with a lot of headphones. They don't clamp tightly, but their weight causes them just to sink down, which puts pressure on the top of my head and gets uncomfortable fast. With the Cambrian, I can wear it for 5 to 8 hours straight without any pain on the crown of my head. I also had a friend of mine measure the clamping force using his professional equipment, and it came in at about 0.38 kg force. So for reference, there is a very known headphone that weighs very strong clamping force, the XM6. This is around 0.44, and the XM5 is at 0.4, and the Outwear hits 0.48, and the QCY H3 Pro goes all the way up to 0.53, and the Edifier W830NB is about 0.47. So yeah, comfort-wise, there is really hard not to praise this thing. So of course, clamping feel still just depends on your head shape, so you do need to try it yourself. And let's be real, how it looks when you are wearing it matters too. Now let's get to the important part, the sound quality. This is ROSESELSA's first Bluetooth over-ear as a hi-fi focused brand. So looking at the stock tuning and the frequency response, the Cambrian follows a slightly bass-boosted sound signature. So there is a mild bass lift in the 80 to 300 Hz range, but it's well controlled. So there is no muddles, and percussion sounds punchy and dynamic, and the bass instruments have excellent definition. so you can clearly feel the impact of the drum hits right at your ears. However, the sub-bass extension is just very average. If you really focus on drum tracks, it can feel a little unsatisfying, and bass-heavy music sometimes feels too centered rather than truly expansive. The mid-range from 300 to 1 kHz dips slightly, but thanks to the enhanced bass, the vocals still sound solid and present, with a strong sense of intimacy, and the sibilance is very well controlled. The vocals sit fairly close to your ears and follow a clean, natural tuning. Male vocals in lower range can sound a bit soft, but honestly, at a price point under $300, this level of vocal performance is way beyond what I expected. The female vocals are full and powerful, and even something like the XG comes through cleanly without that overly just electronic edge. So because of the bass masking, the treble isn't very bright, but it's well balanced. The orchestra textures come through nicely, and the slight lift around 7 kHz adds solid instrument detail and clarity. Once you turn on the LDAC, the sub-bass becomes fuller and richer, and you can really feel the soundstage open up, and the presentation gets more spacious and atmospheric. With excellent separation, nothing feels like it's just fighting for the space. It's very immersive, and in hi-fi mode, the bass gain is reduced, and the vocal moves forward, and the overall sound becomes cleaner and brighter. The sibilance control stays excellent, and the treble gets a bit more sparkle. By comparison, the Edifier W830NB lacks sub-bass below the 60 Hz, which hurts immersion. It does have around a 5 dB boost in the 60 to 200 Hz range, so drum impact is still decent, but it shares the same weakness in sub-bass extension. The vocals are slightly recessed, which reduces the intimacy and also makes them sound a bit muffled. The sibilance control is also clearly weaker than on the Cambrian, and that's probably the most noticeable difference between these two. So personally, I think the Cambrian adapts well to a wide range of the music genres. Saying it completely destroys the flagship levels might be a stretch, but based on my own listening, it clearly outperforms the Edifier W820 and the 830 at the same price. This is exactly what I would say a performance above the level. And going up against $80 headphones, yeah, it holds its ground just fine. Measured with a BK4195 microphone, the Cambrian delivers an average noise reduction of about maybe -30.1 dB. Combined with the natural mid to high frequency isolation advantage of a closed back over-ear design, its noise cancelling bandwidth extends to nearly about 5 kHz, which is honestly kind of insane at this price. If you're not familiar with what the noise cancelling bandwidth means, here is the simple version. The wider the bandwidth, the more effectively the headphone can cover the mid-range frequencies where the human hearing is most sensitive. That also means stronger reduction of the human voices. On the flip side, if the bandwidth is narrow, the vocal noise cancellation becomes weak or even non-existent. Some poorly built headphones can actually make things worse and introduce what feels like reverse noise amplification. A good example is our previous review of the Soundcore Liberty 4NC. That model has fairly deep noise cancelling strength, but its bandwidth is limited. It mainly targets no-frequency noise, while the human voices are barely reduced at all. When we line up the noise cancelling curves of several competing products in the same range, so you can see that due to the similar physical structures, their positive isolation and high-frequency noise cancellation are fairly close. However, in the low to mid-frequency range, the Cambrian leads by roughly 10 dB around the board. And just to be clear, a 10 dB difference means more than double the perceived effectiveness. Even compared to higher-priced models like the Sony Outwear, the Cambrian only falls slightly behind in the extreme sub-bass. Everywhere else is basically keeping up. At this point, I genuinely wondering, did they just used to work for the Sony or something? From the Ceramic 6 to the Cambrian, each one just keeps getting closer. In real-world use on my daily commuting, the Cambrian reduces around 80% of the subway noise and roughly 45% of the human voices, which feels very similar to the Sony Outwear. By comparison, the Edifier W830NB cuts maybe about 50% of the subway noise, with almost no effectively voice isolation at all. The QCY H3 Pro just performs at a similar level. For low-frequency sounds like the air conditioner or the machine hum, the Cambrian's noise cancellation mode eliminates about 90% of that rumble. There is no obvious background hiss, and it doesn't artificially boost the voice or the sharp transient sound either. In terms of the overall noise cancellation performance, it honestly starts to approach what you'd expected from in-ear ANC modes at the same price. That said, over-ear headphones do have a natural disadvantage compared to in-ear when it comes to the low-frequency cancellation. Even with similar precision power, over-ear simply just can't cancel noise as precisely as the source. There are a few smaller advantages worth mentioning. In terms of the gaming latency, the Cambrian supports both wired and wireless connection, so latency really isn't something you need to stress about. So it also includes a dedicated gaming mode, with latency dropping to around 130 milliseconds, which is totally fine for gaming. Speaking of latency, I've always wanted to do a full comparison ranking focused on it, but once I get into that, things like the network conditions and the devices and testing equipment all start affecting the result. So if you guys have any good ideas on how to approach that, let me know. Of course, no product is perfect, and this one does have its flaws. The app experience has improved a lot compared to about half a year ago, and they've even added the experimental features. However, I don't expect them to open up full EQ customization anytime soon. If a brand is serious about its acoustic philosophy, they usually prefer to handle tuning themselves and leave the final judgment to users. That said, there are still occasionally background app shutdown issues. Actually, I personally haven't experienced any LDAC dropouts so far because some of you just mentioned that it's a common issue in the other headphones. And the earpads use protein laser, which is skin-friendly and unlikely to cause irritation, but over time, they do develop visible wrinkles, and it's pretty hard in summer, so they are much better suited for colder seasons. I really think the brands should consider including extra earpads made from the different materials to give users more flexibility. To wrap things up, I honestly have to say the ROSESELSA's pace of the improvement is way faster than I expect. At this price point, the Cambrian basically has no real competition and can fairly be seen as a lower-cost alternative to the Sony XM5. Alright, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Hope this video brings you some help and interest you in this headphone. See you in the next video. Go on, Jessie!